Hi. In our initial demo, we had some problems with the model. And this is because we went to code before we really had a good idea of how we were going to code the model. So what we want to do is go back now and look at, maybe diagram out some components of the model that will help us not make such mistakes in the future. The reason we've done it in this order is to point out strongly the fact that you do not want to sit down and start coding before you have a good idea of what your model is going to be. So, remember, one of the problems we had was, what is the final destination of a part? We created a part. At the same time, we placed an entry for it in the inventory. But then we had this part hanging out, and the question was, wait a minute, do we really need to create a part? If all we're doing is placing it in inventory? Well, the answer is yes. We need to create a part because we're not putting all the information up for that part in our inventory. We need to put the information for that part someplace else. But when we create that part, we don't want to retain it. We have nothing to retain it in. Let's say we created that part in some sort of controller, and that controller then was hanging on to a whole bunch of parts without any kind of organization. What do we do with them? How do we account for all of these parts hanging out? And most importantly, what happens when the program executes and we're leaking memory for all these parts? So the answer is, or at least in this version of the model, the answer is to create these parts with a retain count of 0 initially, make them weak parts, if you will, and then add them to another class or to another object. And the object that we're going to add them to is going to be called a parts catalog. A parts catalog is just going to be kind of a flat collection. Maybe it's an array, or maybe it's even an NSSet object where each member can only appear once in the set. But we create this parts catalog, and it contains the information for each part in the system. And it contains all of that information, all 6 properties: the name, the part number, the description, the quantity, the reorder quantity, but it doesn't contain the bin information. The bin information is going to be contained in the inventory, and the inventory will contain the bin number, the part number, and the actual quantity that's in that bin. Okay, so that solves one problem we had with inventory, where a part could not appear in more than one bin. So the problem we have with part, what to do with all of those parts, is simply solved by saying, well, when we create a part, we don't add it to inventory, we add it to the parts catalog. So making a new part places it in the catalog. Now, let's say that the user has an option. They can create a new part with no quantity, and if they do that, it just goes into the catalog. But if they create a new part with a quantity, it goes into the catalog, and then that quantity goes into inventory in the appropriate bin number. So now, how do we deal with the inventory question that we had when we added a new part into a bin that already had a part in it? It kicked out the old part. Well, that's a little bit more difficult to handle. Inventory, let's say, will still contain a mutable dictionary where the keys are the bin numbers, but instead of the values just being an array containing the part number and the quantity, let's make the values a set of arrays containing each of which contains the part number and the quantity. When we make an NSSet, there is a stricture on the set that says that an object in a set, each object in a set, must be unique. We can have a counted set, and that would take care of the quantity, but let's not do that. Let's just have a set, and each member of that set is an object which is an array which contains 2 fields, the part number and the quantity. So now this takes care of the problem of each bin only being able to have one part in it. So now, what happens when we delete a part? What really is the act of parts deletion? Well, now that we have this parts catalog, we can see that part deletion is really just removing the part from the catalog. But if we're going to remove the part from the catalog, in other words, make that part no longer available within the system, we need to check to see if there are any in inventory, and we need to think about what we're going to do about that. So this is something that we know we're going to have this issue. Maybe they want to delete the part from the system, but keep any remaining that are in inventory until those are all used up. Maybe we want to delete the part from the system and remove any that are in inventory because we're going to go through the parts room and cull those parts out. Maybe they're being replaced by another part number. Who knows? So this is an example of when diagramming a model might reveal certain things that the business users haven't thought of. What happens when I delete a part? Should I remove it from inventory? Should I retain it in inventory? Tell me what to do. And this is an example of a situation where you would go back to the client and say, have you thought of this? So now that we have a little bit better idea of what our model is going to do, now we can go back and start coding our model. And we can use what we already have, but there's going to be some significant changes there. Thank you very much.